Alright, so a quick little pit stop here. We're in Arizona here. This is a lovely, what is this called? Cochise Canyon? No, what is it called? Anyway, it's pretty unique. You got all these stones for miles piled up. Look up on this side here too. And so I was thinking about the Baha'i teachings about us being one humanity and stuff, and the conflict going on in Israel, you know, over Jerusalem, and how people choose sides, and like the evangelicals are backing, you know, in this country, Jews, and then you have, you know, even the Palestinians wanted to make peace with the Jews, didn't care about Jerusalem or the Temple Mount. You have other forces within Islam, like the Iranians or other people who would, oh no, you can't give that up. You gotta keep the fight going. You got them groups like Hezbollah and all that that'll send children to blow themselves up. And there's extremes on the Israeli side also, but it's occurred to me, what's the difference between sending your grandsons or your children and your grandchildren, your sons and your daughters, to die over a pile of stones, because that's what the Temple Mount is there in Jerusalem, and what's the difference between that and sacrificing your child on an altar of stone? Somebody tell me that. What's the difference? You know, and didn't God stop Abraham from sacrificing? Well, if you're Muslim, you believe it was Ishmael, and Ishmael was the firstborn, and that's what makes sense. Or if you're Jewish or Christian, you believe it was Isaac. So it doesn't make a difference. It's the same. It's the principle of the story. It was God did not want him, you know, was showing that he doesn't require you to sacrifice your children in worship of him. And you know, you look at all the cultures around the world who did practice human sacrifice and things like that, and they had their altars and stuff. So what's the difference? If you're going to send your children to die for a pile of stones called the Temple Mount, or if you're going to be like one of these, was it the Incans or the Mayans or whoever around the world who sacrificed people on altars, there's no difference. And I think people need to look at it in that respect. I mean, whether or not the Temple Mount is the temple, or it's like the historian Josephus said, you know, the Romans destroyed the temple so thorough, and then they built a garrison. So it doesn't matter what, it's a pile of stones. And at some point, Palestinians and Jews are going to have to make up their mind as to whether or not they're going to keep going for generation after generation, sacrificing their children and grandchildren for a pile of stones, because that's what it is if you look at it, you know. And if you live here in America and stuff, you gotta decide, are you going to sacrifice your children for evangelical theology, and to push this narrative that, you know, the temple's got to be rebuilt, and only support Israel and not look at things fairly and stuff and everything, you know. And if you're Palestinian, yeah, are you going to let these groups, these outside groups, you might want to live there in peace. You don't care about the Temple Mount. You don't, you know, maybe you could trade it off in some deal with the Israelis to have peace. You know, you get a continuous piece of land that doesn't include Jerusalem, and you don't have to have these little narrow, you know, cuts between the land, whatever. Or move, come to America. Go anywhere. Go to Canada. Go get the hell out of there. Are you going to let the future generations of your family be sacrificed for a pile of stones and somebody's theology, no matter what side you're on? Because that's what it amounts to. Now you have the Iranian theology getting behind it and supporting Hezbollah and Syria and all this, and you got what's his name from Turkey vowing they'll never give up Jerusalem, and all these types of things. Take a look. There's some stones there. You want to come over here? Have them die for these stones? What about those stones? How about those stones over there? Because that's what it is. That's all it is. Doesn't matter around the world where it is, what it is. Jerusalem, Temple Mount, or any other places in the world that people all know. That's ours, and it's more important to us than it is to you, whatever. It's a pile of stones. It's an altar of stone, Temple Mount. Jesus, peace be upon him, and Muhammad both talked about praising God, and that he didn't dwell in temples, and Jesus, peace be upon him, said love your neighbor as yourself, and you fulfill the commandments, and it's the same as loving God. And he said, it's praise and thanksgiving that God wanted. He didn't want sacrifice of bulls and all this, and the blood and all this type of stuff. Well, so tell me, what's the difference? If God doesn't want the sacrifice of bulls and the blood and all that and everything on altars and stuff, does he want the blood and the sacrifice of your children on a pile of stones or over a pile of stones? So just wanted to put that out there as it occurred to me. Pile of stones or flags or whatever, theologies, ideologies. Pretty much love your neighbor, do right, do good, all humanity, quit killing each other over piles of stones, and, resources, things like this. There's plenty to go around. I'm not saying we become some big socialist commune and stuff. I believe in work and people reaping what they sow, both in their moral lives and things, and how they treat other people, and also for the amount of work and effort you put into your life. You should be able to reap some benefit from it over, instead of somebody who puts no effort for it and wants to be a pothead or alcoholic and sit on their asses their whole lives and, not take responsibility for their own children and things like that. I don't see this rob everybody to give to the people who do nothing. But anyhow, all that aside, just think about it. What's the Temple Mount? It's a pile of stones. Are you going to keep sacrificing future generations of children for a pile of stones? You're going to let them take your children from America here eventually someday? If there's a great war, big conflict between the Jews and all the Arabs and Muslim nations, and are we going to get involved? Your children going to go over there? I could see if it was just to make peace and save lives or something, keep the Jews or the Arabs from being slaughtered by, which other side's going to do that. But as far as, that's their pile of stones, and it goes along with our religious teaching. So we're going to send our kids over there to die to prove we're right. I don't see that. Are you going to let that happen to your children here in America or anywhere else in the world? It's a pile of stones. See it for what it is. All right. Wish you all the best out there. Stay healthy. Be safe on the road and all that. And God bless. Adios.